Welcome to Al Jazeera and welcome to our special coverage of the earthquake, the devastating earthquake that hit Nepal a week ago. Nepal in ruins. And it was at this time, 7 days ago, that this country's largest natural disaster hit an area so large it's devastated the lives of millions of people. While international help is slowly trickling in, emergency crews are working around the clock trying to find those that may have survived the earthquake and looking for bodies. The damage may top as high as $10 billion, and officials say they have yet to reach some of the remotest towns and villages in the country that was affected by the epicenter. Let's give you some more statistics now of 7 days on, and we're looking at more than 6,621 people dead. The number of people injured has now surpassed 10,000. Tens of thousands are believed to have lost their home. According to an Interior Ministry source, as many as 40,000 are recorded to have lost their homes. That may rise to 400,000. And the United Nations says nearly 1.5 million people need food aid. The rural areas of the northeast of the country have been particularly affected. Unofficial estimates say that 85% of the buildings there have been completely destroyed and are just rubble and ruins. My colleague Andrew Simmons has been to that devastated area and sent this report.
Through the Himalayas on an old trade route to the Chinese border, natural beauty is scarred by what nature itself inflicted on this country 1 week ago. With all the ruined buildings, for now a way of life has been extinguished. Without their homes, without their farm buildings, how can people plan ahead? And without loved ones, how can they cope? That's a question going through the mind of the girl wearing the pink coat. Reshma Shrestha's mother and her baby brother are both buried in this rubble. Reshma's 11 years old, standing with her grandparents, wishing her mother and brother could still be alive. For 3 days, they've watched from the pavement. A Chinese search and rescue team has now taken over the operation. But with such an odour in the air, they're not expecting to find anyone alive. And Reshma's grandmother feels that all hope is lost.
My daughter-in-law and grandson was so beautiful. This tragedy is unbearable. I'm not sure what will happen now, how we'll manage. We lost everything. My son has reacted really badly. He doesn't have work, and now I feel I've lost him.
It becomes too much for Reshma. Her father is in shock and has taken to drink. He hasn't been seen for hours. The searching goes on into the night, and the darkness can't fade out any of the pain. The Chinese search team plan how to tackle the next day. Reshma's grandfather wants to hear some news, but the only development is his son suddenly appearing. Slurring his words because of the alcohol, but clear in his thoughts.
It's a dire situation. My wife and baby son are buried here. Many people are buried elsewhere. But what is the government doing? We have nothing. Please tell the government we hardly have anything to eat.
Not far away, the flames of protest. People demanding food and shelter. Reshma is spending another night under plastic sheeting for her shelter, surrounded by relatives. Her grandmother is unwell. What goes through the mind of an 11-year-old in this situation? Her cousins try to lighten the mood. But daylight brings reality. It's the start of yet another day, and the Chinese search and rescue team are back on the ground. It now appears they may have found a body. Mother and baby son are found huddled together. It was never going to be a rescue. Reshma's family moved down the road away from the crowds, trying to seek some privacy for their grief. But this earthquake doesn't even allow dignity with the lives it takes. Mother and baby don't get a hearse or even a car for the journey to their cremation. Their bodies pass a family that can't absorb what the shaking earth took from their lives. a father who can't face up to what's happened, and a girl who faces an uncertain future without the love of a mother. Andrew Simmons, Al Jazeera, Sangachauk, Nepal.
It's a desperate situation and a story that is repeated across the affected earthquake zone. Well, still to come on this special coverage live from Kathmandu in our programme Nepal in Ruins, dissecting the earthquake, the tremendous forces that left Nepal in ruins.
And every morning I hope that it was a nightmare, but it's not.
Plus the personal journey of an Al Jazeera correspondent who calls Nepal her home. And facing the incredible loss of historical monuments, how will it affect the country's economy? Both legs, please. Yes, terrible and difficult time for the authorities to try and juggle everything that they have to deal with. But the UN is also helping in estimates that more than 8 million people have been affected by the earthquake, and more than 2 million of them need tents, clean water, access to food and medicines, certainly within the next 3 months. Now, the Nepalese Prime Minister, Sushil Koirala, says the government is overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. Countries from around the world have sent aid. The United States has pledged $10 million in relief funds, and Britain has donated $7.5 million, as well as Norway, who've given $4 million. But rescue teams say they're hindered by aftershocks, a lack of transport, and a loss of power in parts of Nepal. Almost the entire Nepalese army is involved in the rescue operation, and that accounts for 90,000 servicemen. Majindra Rajpal is the Nepalese Minister for Information and Communications. He spoke exclusively to Al Jazeera on the current conditions that the government is working under and what sort of help they are giving to the people of Nepal in this exclusive access report.
This is a calamity of enormous proportion. The need there is so much that certainly, people will be asking for more, and the efforts we are making certainly is not up to the level of the demand that's there. But certainly we're doing the best that's possible.
How is the rescue aid and recovery operation proceeding? Are you on top of the situation now? You seem to be overwhelmed.
First few days, yes, of course, we were a bit overwhelmed. Overwhelmed because the magnitude of destruction, it was very difficult to get an estimate of that. No preparation was there for an earthquake of the magnitude that has happened in our country.
The government has announced a $1,000 compensation scheme for those families that have lost a member of the family. How do you envisage distributing that money to the public in this particular scenario and situation, and not be accused of mismanagement or corruption because of all the paperwork that's required to register somebody that's died?
The distribution will be done at the local level by local officials at the village level, township level, and municipalities level, to make sure that it's done transparently, it's done accountably. What we have done is created a monitoring committee, support and monitoring committee, which will have representation of all political parties. We know, at the end of the day, accountability has to be there to people of Nepal, accountability has to be there to the Parliament of Nepal, accountability has to be there to any organization or any bilateral or multilateral organization that has provided support.
I've been to one of these open camp areas where people have had to spend their own money building their own tent, taking what little possessions they have from their home, and they're sleeping in the open. And the main complaint was, fine, we haven't got any aid from the government, but what hurts us more is that nobody from the government or from the district level has come to see how we are. And one lady quoted, "We're living in this pathetic condition." What have you got to say to people like that?
Well, government comprises not only of political leaders, comprises of bureaucracy, comprises of army, comprises of police, comprises of local officials. Anyone being there is government being there.
Well, the government has found it very difficult to deliver health services in the aftermath of the earthquake. My colleague Mohammed Jamjoon has more on this.
Tired of waiting, they've decided to act.
केही हार्डेड एरियाहरूमा जस्तै गभर्मेन्ट
Our local volunteers are using their own transportation. They're going to relief missions on their bikes and reaching the hard-hit areas.
In this Kathmandu college building, they're charting the extent of the disaster, collecting donations, deploying in order to deliver medical supplies, food, and much more.
What's happening here is truly remarkable. Youth activists, students, and others, they've taken matters into their own hands, and now they're doing all they can to make sure they can deliver aid to those here who need it most.
Going to areas the Nepalese government and other international aid groups haven't yet reached. Anyone is welcome to join, for one simple reason.
There's no proper mobilization of youths who are ready to help.
It's why their mission is so vital. For even in this country's capital, suffering can still be seen almost anywhere you look. One reason anger is only growing.
We are concentrated on
a sentiment this group resists.
It's a disaster and we all need to cope up together and stick together and just be optimistic regarding what's happening all around us.
With street scenes like these a disturbing new reality, it's a homegrown message of hope and resolve needed more than ever. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera, Kathmandu, Nepal.
A difficult task all round for those that are trying to help. Well, joining me now is Valerie Amos. She's the UN United Nations Under-Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs and the Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you for your time. We know how valuable it is. Miss Amos, your initial impressions of what you see?
Well, we've made some progress. I was very concerned at the beginning because of those chaotic scenes that we were seeing. It's always like that at the beginning of a major crisis like this. Of course, our hearts go out to all of those people who have lost loved ones. It's a terrible tragedy. Coordination is a major challenge, getting the supplies in and getting them out. We have one international airport with one runway. So how we organize ourselves and how all of the different teams that have come in are best able to make maximum use of their skill and expertise is the thing that we have been working on. Just in the time I've been here, I've seen some improvement. Our challenge now is to get it even better.
Now, the government did say to me that the roads are open, the highways, the airport is the issue, the backlog has been cleared. Your impression, just to clarify, do you think that backlog has been cleared and the scenario there is more organised?
It is much more organised. The challenge is the amount that we have to bring in, the difficult logistical challenge. I was able to see for myself yesterday these small villages flattened on the tops of hills. We cannot land helicopters, so we're now looking at, can we put supplies at the bottom of the hills so that people can at least come down and get something?
In terms of the international aid effort, a $450 million appeal, but yet on the day of the earthquake, 15 global appeals for help around the world. Nepal is in that melting pot. Is there enough money all round?
There's been a huge outpouring of support for Nepal. I think the issue is not going to be the short-term relief effort. We're all focused on that. I think the big challenge is going to be, after this, the monsoon rains, rebuilding the country. That's going to be our big challenge going forward.
For the moment, Ms Amos, thanks so much for joining us. We know that your time is valuable and you've got a lot of areas to assess. For the moment, thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Valerie Amos there, the UN humanitarian chief. Now, scientists are analysing the data around the earthquake that hit Nepal 7 days ago. My colleague Tariq Bazli looks into that to see whether it's ever going to happen again.
To understand what happened in Nepal, you need to take a look at the geology of the region. You have the Indian tectonic plate, a massive wedge of the Earth's crust. It's riding up against the Eurasian plate at a rate of about 5 centimetres each year. It may not sound much, but where they collide along this fault line running the length of Nepal, tremendous forces are at play. From this cross-section, you can see these forces crumple the land upwards, and as the Indian plate pushes under the Eurasian. This creates the Himalayas, the world's highest mountains. It also creates a zone of seismic instability. That instability is made worse in an area like the Kathmandu Valley. It sits on an old lake bed. Beneath it is a 300-metre deep layer of clay. This reflects and focuses the force of an earthquake and can cause what's known as soil liquefaction. This is when vibrations cause solid ground to turn into something like quicksand. This can swallow up buildings and roads and result in substantial damage.
Well, let's get more on this with Mriganka Ghatak. He's with the Geological Survey of India. Joins me now live from New Delhi. Thank you for joining us on this special programme, sir. A question that many of the public here have been asking us as we've been surveying the area and reporting this story is the worry that this could have been predicted. Could this earthquake have been predicted?
Actually, I mean, there are no ways that you can predict exactly, but the fact that this has been a seismic hotbed for quite some time due to its past historical and instrumental history makes it one of the places where such earthquakes are expected, but the exact time, date and location are not possible to predict.
Indeed. How insecure should people feel here when they talk and feel post-tremors, little quakes? What sort of advice can you give to people watching Al Jazeera who are here in Nepal experiencing this? Should they worry?
As the reports come, I think it is still receiving the aftershocks which come after the main shock. So if the structure in which they are residing, they are already badly damaged, so they should be very careful and they should take all possible precautions not to get any further damage, because aftershocks are still coming, though they are little lesser in magnitude.
Well, we shall certainly see what happens in the coming days and weeks. For the moment, Mriganka Ghatak from the Geological Survey in India. Thank you for your time, sir, live from New Delhi. Thank you. Let's take a quick look now at what's involved in rebuilding Nepal, because this is a huge task, not just for the government, but for the international community. You've got a vested interest in the historic nature of Nepal. The US consultancy, IHS, says the cost of reconstruction could be as high as $5 billion. Now that would almost be 20% of the country's gross domestic product, which in 2013 was just over $19 billion. Nepal is one of the poorest nations in Asia and relies heavily on foreign aid. Long-term reconstruction is likely to be funded by donor nations. Well, that reconstruction is certainly something that will be put on the back burner for the time being, because people that have been affected by the earthquake have really been shocked to the core, none more so than one of my colleagues, Shabina Shestra. She is Nepali in origin. She was born, raised and has lived here all her life with her young family, and she lives in one of the historic centres of the capital. She's gone back home and this is her story and her experience.
This is Patan Darbar Square, what used to be one of the most beautiful places in Kathmandu. Generations of my family have grown up in this neighborhood. This is where my children would come in the mornings to feed the pigeons and run around the square, just as I did when I was a child. Nobody is here to feed the pigeons now.
A few hours before the earthquake struck, I was here talking about the importance of preserving architectural heritage. And now, as you can see, there isn't much left. There have been major temples which have just gone down.
Up north, the ruins of the once beautiful Radhakrishna temple is being cleared.
Up there is Jiten, a very good friend who's also been responsible for saving many of the architectural sites over here. Jiten!
We thought there was nobody buried, so we just cleaned the roads, but now there might still be someone underneath here.
My hometown is a maze of narrow alleys. On the day of the earthquake, our team went straight out to shoot in the neighborhood. These are some of the scenes. My grandmother's old neighborhood had several people buried in the rubble. We try to go there now, but the alleys are all blocked. We wander through the houses and gardens where people have taken shelter. On every other corner, there is a collapsed building blocking the alleys. They found 10 bodies in this neighborhood.
So apparently it's in here, it's really dark and scary.
There were many people here, including police. Our sister-in-law, her arms are full of wounds. She survived. She's staying in that shed.
8-year-old Ritesh is very scared. He huddles with his mother, Reena. She tells me she lost her husband and her other son. My aunt, my uncle, my cousin too, Ritesh says. They've gone far away.
And every morning I hope that it was a nightmare, but it's not. I mean, you don't wake out of this nightmare. It's a continuation. And Nepal has no choice but to rebuild, and hopefully I can give a better tour next time.
Terrible time for people to try and rebuild their lives, and the other worry, of course, is trying to rebuild Nepal and Kathmandu's historic monuments. But will they be rebuilt at all? We have more. They had been standing in Nepal's capital for hundreds of years, majestic and bold, royal palaces, monuments and places of worship. Visited, according to official figures, by over 3.5 million people annually and earning the country millions of tourist dollars. Now they lie in ruins, and this nation can only wonder what will become of them. Tom Bell has lived here with his family for a number of years and is an author and expert on the various structures.
Well, I mean, this is a really emblematic building. This was built by Prithvi Narayan Shah, the king who created modern Nepal, as a kind of monument to his victory after he conquered Kathmandu in 1768. So, you know, it's really integral to Nepal's history.
So too are the many statues and carvings that adorn the buildings. Those that are rescued are carefully lifted to safety and stored for safekeeping. How long do you think something like that is going to take to repair?
Well, who knows? I mean, that really depends on how this is conducted, how well the whole thing's handled.
I mean, you may not be able to give me figures, but in terms of whether Nepal has the money to do this?
Well, I very much doubt that it'll come out of the Nepali exchequer, the money to do this. Nepal receives a lot of foreign aid, and I would imagine that this is the kind of thing where that foreign aid may ultimately be spent after more urgent humanitarian things have been attended to.
It's a position even the authorities that look after the tourism industry have reluctantly accepted. It's going to take time to reconstruct not just the physical, historic structures, but also to rebuild tourist confidence that Nepal is a safe place to visit.
Our heart is open to welcome all our guests. So nature and to some extent culture also, the buildings archaeologically very important. Our history now we have lost, we have missed. So that we have to build will take time. But the natural part, we have to forget the pain.
Forgetting such pain and shock for many is not easy. Yet many continue to see the destruction as a new tourist attraction. Nature's wrath tore down many of the capital's iconic buildings. Structures that the Nepalese are proud of. Structures that are dear to a nation.
This is a very special place for us. It's like the Eiffel Tower of Paris. We lost this tower once before in an earthquake in 1934. It means a lot to us.
As many walk past the ruins of their past, just as many wonder how quickly can the past be rebuilt. Indeed, well, the Nepalese government is pledging thousands of dollars to each family of each victim and another $400 for funeral costs. Now, relief supplies are slowly trickling in, and survivors whose homes are still standing have started to pack their tents and try and return home and rebuild their lives if they can. The United Nations Children's Fund has delivered 30 tons of first aid, hygiene and water purification kits, and more aid is on its way. But tens of thousands of Nepalese see that the weeks and months ahead will be a test of their resilience, and trying to find a route through Nepal in ruins will take some time. Nepal.